The student, the athlete, the culture. Welcome back, everyone, to the second series of Moses Squared podcast. We hope you enjoyed our last episode. We are now streaming episodes on Apple Podcasts, so make sure you subscribe to our channel, as well as YouTube and Instagram, and leave a review. Now, let's get into episode 14. This is us.
Welcome back to another episode of Moses Squared, the podcast. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We have another great episode for you guys. It's one that really struck both me and Lauren again. Here in America, we had another case of police brutality. Another young man lost his life. 42-year-old George Floyd, a guy who apparently bounced a check. Allegedly, police responded. They said he resisted to some extent, and turns out 3-4 guys ended up on this man's back where he, lost his life. He never regained consciousness. And, it's sad that we have to continuously talk about these topics. This is who we are, apparently. This is the U.S. This is us, in a sense. And it's just sad. It's disheartening as a young man, a young black man, to hear stories again and again like this. So I'm going to ask Lauren and get her take on it. I know you have a range of emotions. It seems like we're almost getting fatigued with these emotions.
Yeah.
What are your feelings today? What do you feel as a young black female in America today? Today,
I feel torn. I think yesterday I felt sad. Today it's more so like, okay, we're obviously going to keep talking about it because it keeps happening. And then it's also like, okay, if we aren't having these conversations, do we become desensitized? And then you're like, okay, well, I'm kind of tired of having these conversations because a couple days after an incident like this, it's like people are still outraged, of course. But then you have people who are quiet. And those are kind of people that you are looking at a little side-eyed. And you're like, okay, well, why don't you have a reaction to this, good or bad, Right. And usually when people can't find solidarity on their thoughts when it comes to police brutality, and they don't side with, one side, it's usually because they don't see an issue with it. And they don't want to hear the backlash, and they don't want it to be like, oh, let's not bring race into this. And I think I'm at a point where it's just like my senses are heightened, where I'm thinking about the people who have said those borderline questionable remarks about race or why do we have to bring race into it, and ask questions like that, because this is 100% a race issue. This is 100% based on the color of our skin. And there's no way around that. And so when people bring up questions about, why we bring race into things, and when I say we, I mean Black people, why we, we bring that to the forefront of incidents, whether it's police brutality or whether it's, not having, enough food on our tables, or, just living, the amount of people who are homeless in Baltimore right now. It's always going to be a race problem, because when you see things on TV where Black life is not valued and can literally be stomped out or kneed in the back of the neck for 10 whole minutes, how else are Black people supposed to think? So my question to you is, how many instances of this do we have to see for us all lives, right? Need to realize that Black lives, they seemingly don't matter to the United States of America.
Well, and to answer your question, it's funny to me because, those same folks who, I made a post today essentially asking people, because I read posts about my peers, fellow NFL guys, former NFL guys taking a knee, the Kaepernick. Yeah. We've been dealing with that for years and years and years. And, they're wondering, why would this man disrespect the flag? What is the purpose? Not during the game, not during the outrage from Americans who had an issue with a peaceful protest. Those same Americans are quiet today about another man kneeling on a guy's neck until he takes his final breaths. So for me, it's like, you don't have to say whether or not you agree. The lack of support, the lack of outrage for this instance shows, where people stand for me. Yeah. And essentially it's disheartening because, again, I'm a Black male. This man was minding his business, going about his day. We've seen instances of fathers with their kids, fathers, trying to make a living legally,
Yep.
and they're snuffed out, and it's like, it comes to a point as a man, as a protector for your family. It's like, where do we draw the line? And it's like somebody has to step up, and I pray I never see something like this, but I'm almost positive I will make an action. I'm not gonna. We all got to go to jail then, so at least we go to jail alive, and we get to go home to our family to fight another day.
Yeah, I was gonna try to break that up a little bit. So the video that it kind of has surfaced is, obviously George Floyd on the ground, cop's knee is in his neck, but there's another police officer standing there who is kind of like trying to hush the crowd a little bit. There are multiple people there, one person with their phone, and he's just trying to kind of get them to die down. And so, as a bystander, how should you react in a situation? A lot of these people, I'm assuming, were Black. There were a few people who came into behind the camera at one point. I believe they were white, but I'm not 100% sure. But they were expressing some concern because they saw this man on the ground. But how do you act as a bystander? I mean, I've never been in that situation.
Yeah.
I hope to never be in that situation, but by all means, you never know what may happen.
It's no right way. It's like, if you interfere, they use all of these terms to make, to protect them. Don't interfere with our investigation. Don't, it's like at the end of the day, bump your investigation. Is a person, there's a life at stake, and their job is not to play judge, jury, and executioner. They're to enforce the laws. They're to de-escalate situations.
Yeah.
And keep the community safe for the tax-paying citizens who allow these people to, live on salary and do. And don't get me wrong, I understand the police have an important part. They're a vital piece in, keeping society somewhat informed, in line. But I think over time it's becoming clear that they have a different agenda.
Yeah.
And to see no indictments, to see guys not even face charges upon killing a man, lets me know that it's systematic, and that the DAs and they're having those behind door meetings, letting these guys know that they can do this, because it's not a natural instinct to kill a person unless there'll be no repercussion. Because you got to think about that time away from these guys know it. They say the worst case scenario, I'll get fired, paid leave. That's not a punishment.
And that's not a punishment. That's not a punishment. And as you can see with the protests and riots happening in Minneapolis and around the country, like there was a video that came out maybe yesterday or 2 days ago in D.C. These people in D.C. fighting the cops back at this point because, one, they don't feel protected. Two, they think that they're targets, and then they're going to fight for their lives at this point. Because, literally, crowds of people were jumping on a police officer who was trying to detain someone. I'm not sure the background of the story, but it was a video that came out on Instagram, I believe. But what I want to say about the situation is, I work in Baltimore now, and it's a very interesting place to work, especially when you're in the media, in the world of media and journalism.
Sure.
A lot of homicides happen there. And our job is to report what's going on in the city, whether it's good or bad. So, yes, we report every single homicide. Yes, we report every time there's a shooting. Not because we want to, just plaster the fact that Baltimore is such a violent town or such a crime-filled city. No, because these are situations and issues that are plaguing the city. And so, we've talked about police brutality multiple times on our episodes. We've talked about, even the good things. We talked about Kobe Bryant a million times in our on our podcast. But our whole, thought around this is that, these are the things that are plaguing our country.
Absolutely.
They're plaguing the Black people. Important. Exactly. And it's extremely important. Plaguing our Black people, our thoughts on how we see the police, the way we don't feel protected.
For sure.
Not even just police, but in our local governments. Because what are our local governments doing about this? Having conversations with people who don't look like you are extremely important. Having relationships and building relationships with people who don't look like you is extremely important. And I think to know that at a young age is awesome. But it's when you start getting older and you start, secluding yourself to these groups of people who only think and who only look like you is when we start having real issues, because now we're not able to talk about things that bother us, talk about things that, we might not agree 100% on, which is okay. Yeah,
or get different perspective.
Exactly.
To hear the same, it's worn on people. And to be honest, I had a conversation, with our bigger sister yesterday, and part of the conversation was, I went to the University of Iowa, which is in the Midwest, and I went to school with a lot of guys, white, black, Hispanic. We didn't even see color. It wasn't even a thing, So it's like we were in that environment. We interacted. We built trust. We had the same trials, tribulations, which grew us closer. But it's like now I still, 10 years removed, I see these guys, I see posts, and it's like we've been separated.
And I was going
to
say, you think you did. You think you guys were on the same page. Exactly.
Right. We've been separated now. We've kind of gone back into our comfort zones and kind of, the norms of life, not so much like college. And it really draws a divide between people. And I don't think that the police, the government understand the effect that these things are having on people, because as a human, you're going to have human emotion.
Yeah.
And, you're going to react. You're going to start to build a wall. You're going to start to protect your family. You're going to start to, do these types of things. And it sounds like language used inside of a war zone. And we're right here in America. This is supposed to be the land of the free.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be an American. But how many of us are proud today to be an American, where we can go online and watch men and women and kids?
And that doesn't have anything to do with race.
No,
going
not
online
at all.
and seeing that has nothing to do with race.
At all. And like you said, the way that people are starting to view the police in different lights, the respect level is low. It's like if these people want to be held to a standard, want respect, you have to respect others. You have to start with that. And I seen another video that was disturbing down in Texas this past weekend. Black kid. It was supposed to be a vehicle violation. He got pulled over. Kid was so scared. He drove home, hopped out, laid down in his yard. His 80-some-year-old grandmother came out to try to shelter him so that the police wouldn't shoot this kid, 15-year-old kid, in his front yard.
Yep.
And it's like...
And they're asking him to get up, and he's like, nope, I'm laying right
here.
He
refused.
I'm laying right here.
He refused. He said, if I get up, y'all gonna shoot me. Y'all gonna find a reason to shoot me. Y'all gonna say, y'all saw my brush. Y'all saw my phone. Y'all saw my... He moved too fast. He was a threat. He was... it's like there's always some story or some narrative that they use to excuse these, but it's like we have to get to the point as Americans, black, white, or otherwise, that we put a foot down and step in and say, hey, wrong is wrong and right is right.
Yeah.
Because these could be your loved ones one day.
Yeah. And there was a church down in Florida who, like the boards on the church where you can kind of fill in whatever you want to say. And so on their board in front of their church, it says white supremacy, most dangerous virus affecting our country since 1492. And that's a whole nother topic. But when I look back and I think about my time at the University of Virginia, and I was enrolled at Virginia when, the KKK came to our campus, when there were riots on our lawn, where we graduate, the same lawn we graduate, the same lawn we walk down, we're going out at night. So the same lawn that we congregate as, classmates, was, the site for where a KKK group decided to come and voice their opinions. And so when you think about white supremacy and we think about how we just allow things to happen like that on a campus, with no repercussions whatsoever, we have to think about how that something like that could stem to something like this. Something where Ahmaud Arbery running down the street, two white men think that they have the power to take someone's life, to try to, a citizen's arrest.
Right.
How do people have that power? I want to know. I want to know how they just have that within them. Are they given that? Like what? How where does this stem from? Really, I know white supremacy is it, but like.
Yeah. Well, I like to take a little deeper. I studied psych, throughout my time in college and at Iowa and Tulane. So we had a ton of conversations about the mind, the way it works. Based on how people are behaving, it's almost like this is their home and we're an intruder. So depending on how they feel that day is how they're allowed to respond. And it's unfortunate because, for us, we're viewed as visitors or, up until a certain point in our history, we weren't even considered a full person.
Yeah.
So to think that these people have change their full mindset and now view us as equal. It's clear when you hold your knee down on someone's neck that you don't consider them human. You didn't see your brother in them. You didn't see your father in them.
Nope.
You didn't see a loved one in them. You saw an animal. And I can't even watch videos of animals being killed that brutally.
Yeah.
Honestly, but that's the type of or lack of compassion that is being portrayed, being exhibited, and it's just sad. It's disheartening. Like I said, as a black male, to know that could have been me right there, gasping for my last breath over a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
I can't stomach it, and there's no way around it. For all of my friends, white, black, and different, we have to, as leaders, make a difference. It's time to step in and really do something different. And I think
responsibility is probably the last point that I would want to touch on when it comes to this issue is responsibility on all parts. On police departments all across the world, doing better, doing better, being better, training better, having conversations with your communities. I know when I was doing some reporting in Southeast DC, place where most homicides happen in Washington, D.C., local gang members were having conversations with police officers weekly. And homicides still happen? Yes. But dialogue, just communicating your concerns, communicating your fears, your threats, and responsibility on regular citizens, regular residents in your area. Like, how can you take responsibility for what's happening in Minneapolis right now?
Yeah.
And that's for all of our listeners, young, older, no matter what career you have. What can you be doing differently? Who can you be having a conversation with about this today? Really just taking responsibility for things that are happening to people who look like you all across the country.
Yeah.
We've seen this happen, like I said, with Ahmaud Arbery, not a police officer, but killed by two white men. We saw this in Louisville, Kentucky 2 weeks ago, maybe, March 13th, when Breonna Taylor was shot 8 times by police who raided their apartment and got the wrong address. Her boyfriend is now in custody of police because he fired back, not knowing what the heck was going on in his apartment that day.
Right.
Her life was taken. And just being responsible before these situations even happen, I think could just prevent a lot of these situations from happening.
Yeah, and I think you're correct. And for myself, I'm not one to get on a soapbox without a solution. So I'm going to, finish it off on this piece, on this leg. But to truly make a difference, I believe in this country, we, black people, white people, Hispanic people, but the minorities, it's time to elevate ourselves into those positions of power.
Yep.
It's time to be the district attorneys. It's time to be the chief of police. It's time to elevate we have to infiltrate that system to create balance.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're going to get a one-sided law that doesn't hold certain people accountable. So, I'm not just preaching.
But we need to not only get there. Sorry to cut you off. Not only get there, but once you're there, to use it to push your community forward. I feel like a lot of these towns who are predominantly black, they have the black mayor, they have black chief of staff, they have a black police commissioner.
Yeah.
But are we progressing? Has this town progressed? What's happening now that was still happening 10 years ago before you got there? So it's not about just obtaining these positions of power, but doing your darnest to make sure that your community, your town, your people are being viewed differently, are being seen differently, can look at you and go, hey, this man got this chair. He's doing what he needs to be doing. How can I be like him? Being an inspiration for these black people in your community.
100%. And I agree with you on that. And I think, it's just a shame. We don't want to harp on this, but we talk about then and now, and that's how we're going to kind of transition out of this. We're going to talk about essentially where we were 5 years ago, because a lot has changed in 5 years in the scope of America, in our lives, in our minds, so we just want to express this part of it to understand our growth for our listeners, let you know who we are, who we're becoming, and who we still inspire to be. So 5 years ago today, Lauren, which would put us roughly 2015.
Yep.
What's the difference? Where were you then? Where was your mind? What were your goals? And how have they progressed up until this point?
I would say, I think 5 years ago and now looks a lot different. Physically, I was living in Virginia as a college student. It was, depends on what part of 2015 we're talking about. But on the earlier parts, I was still a freshman. I was trying to figure things out. I was trying to figure out college. I was trying to figure out my academics. I was trying to figure out social life. I was trying to figure out my basketball life. So mentally, I think I was being pulled a lot of different ways, and I wasn't really forced to focus on one thing other than basketball, and that's just what I put my 100% into. I think mentally, I was just going with the flow, like just going with the college flow. I think now, when I think about 2020, mentally, I think I'm able to put things into perspective of not just myself, but also my peers. Sure. I think whenever there's an issue in my life, or even like nationally, like situations like now, like with the coronavirus, I think 5 years ago, I was able to just think about how it impacted me and my family. Now I think I'm able to see how it impacts my work, how it impacts my my physical, like just working out, because things that happen nationally interrupt my daily life. And it might not always be like that for everyone else, but when I see things that are traumatizing online, I have mental days where I'm like, okay, I just need a break. And so I think I'm just more aware of how issues and how even good things can just impact not only me and my family, but how it also impacts my peers, and how I can be the voice of reason when it comes to just being positive, when it comes to being in tune with your emotions, because not all of them are going to be good emotions. You're going to have days where you don't want to get out of bed. But how do we get past that? How do we let that one day not turn into 2 days? And that's just kind of like my mindset, just remaining positive and wanting to just spread love and just being kind. I always, like, when I pray, I'm just like, Lord, just let everyone be a little bit more kind today. Let them think about someone else today. Allow people to be a little bit less selfish today. And those are things that I keep in my head, so that I'm making sure that I am putting that out into the world every single day. But 5 years ago, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about little old me trying to get through freshman year. But as the years progress and things happen in my life personally and things that happen across the country, I think it's only right to just take a step back from yourself sometimes. So,
Yeah, and I think for myself, 5 years ago, I was with the Kansas City Chiefs. I was still here in Kansas City. The world was a lot different. This was pre-Trump. This was, all of those things. And I like to think of this picture from a step back, essentially. Life was so much different. For me, I was 26 years old. I didn't have a child.
I was going to say babyless.
I didn't have a child. I was thinking about more, how can I use everything to channel my energy? How can I would have been using this as some type of fuel for my training. That's the type of guy I was. But now, 5 years removed, I look at things from a different scope. I have to look at it for the future. How is this world going to be for my daughter? How is this world going to be for my younger siblings and family members and future Moseses to come? So I have a totally different perspective. Instead of being more reactive, I like to be more calculated, and it's interesting, like I said, because like you said, I'd like to take a step back now when I think of things and really slow it down. But just a maturity over 5 years for myself, I see I'm constantly trying to work on something to be a better brother, a better man, a better father. So for me, 5 years removed, a lot has changed. It feels like a little less love in the world, which I don't like. I love love. And I always say that. You could check my tweet. I love love, because it's the purest form of compassion, to even if you don't know somebody, to spread some love. It's infectious. So, that's my 5 year flashback. Things have changed a little bit, but the message remains the same: is continue to spread love. Have those tough conversations, have that dialogue, try to grow, try to gain perspective. And I think it'll make us more well-rounded people.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say, lastly, that we keep the families of, everyone,
George
but
Floyd.
of course, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor's families, just
Ahmaud
in our
Arbery.
thoughts, Ahmaud Arbery, in our thoughts today and every day moving forward. And, you know, be a part of that family as much as you can. You know, there's petitions, there's things going around on the internet that you can try to just help in any way. And just allow these families to know that you're fighting with them. You're hoping you're hoping that they can pull through and that they can fight for justice, because that's what a lot of these families want. A lot of them aren't going to go take the life of their child's killer, but they want them to be behind bars. They don't want just their jobs removed from them or pay removed. Just keep them in your thoughts and your prayers, because it's not just this one flash of their child being killed. It's the days following that, trying to, recuperate and still trying to celebrate that person's life because they were taken so violently.
Yeah. And we're going to continue to promote unity, because at the end of the day, I am proud to be an American. This is the country I was born and raised in. And we're fighting to make it a better place for the future. I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to. So peace and love to all our listeners. We appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of Moses Squared, the podcast. Spread some love today and tune in next week until we return. Thank you. Don't forget to press like, subscribe, and follow at Dezman, DEZMANM.
You can follow me on Instagram at Lauren.Brielle with 2 E's at the end, and on Twitter at Lauren_Brielle with 2 E's at the end. However, to stay updated on everything Moses Squared, follow us on Instagram at Moses Squared Podcast, which is all one word. There, we will be posting everything from sports news to IGTV videos and more. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll catch you next time. God bless.